This conference will now be recorded.
Erica, are you able to start sharing the screen?
Okay.
Right. And I noticed we do have a couple of callers whose lines are not muted. So if you don't mind muting your lines if you're on a phone, that will just help with some of the noise. But again, welcome to the workshop for our round 2 of HUD CARES Act funding. Our grant process is a competitive process. The purpose of our process is that we aim to make the applications and the selection processes consistent and clear. We are providing funding today through these grants, primarily for projects that benefit low and moderate income people and communities. Funds will be awarded to eligible nonprofit and faith-based organizations, and these are primarily for community and economic development programs and programs that assist persons who are homeless. So where did the funds come from? So as part of one of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, through the Community Development Block Grant Program, as well as the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, notified the City of Memphis Division of Housing and Community Development that we would receive a formula allocation in 2 rounds of Community Development Block Grant CARES Act funding to be used specifically for the prevention, preparation, and response to the COVID-19 pandemic. This allocation was authorized by the CARES Act, which was signed in March of 2020. So again, the 2 funding areas of opportunity that we'll talk about today are our round 2 for emergency solutions, the ESG CV2, as well as the Community Development Block Grant Program CV2 round for public service activities. So just a little bit about the public service grant opportunity. These funds and programs will serve low and moderate income persons or urgent need in response to COVID-19. The projects must meet a CDBG national objective, which are to benefit low moderate income people or low and moderate income neighborhoods or communities. And all eligible applications will be considered, but nonprofit service agencies that are providing unique services to individuals and businesses that are impacted by COVID-19 will be prioritized. And funds available for award are, actually this is 1.5 million. There's no minimum or maximum award amount. And the average award that's anticipated is approximately 35,000, but that could vary depending on the project. And then no grants will be awarded to government agencies. In terms of the eligibility requirements for applicants and projects, each activity that's awarded must meet 4 federal requirements. So they must meet a national objective, which, as I said earlier, are benefiting low and moderate income people or communities. They must be an eligible activity under the Community Development Block Grant CARES Act statute. Any program must be in direct response to COVID-19, and funds may not be supplanted or available for the same activity for any other source. So there can't be any duplication of benefits. So activities that are proposed for funding must qualify as an eligible Community Development Block Grant CV activity as listed in the Code of Federal Regulations, and the citation is provided here under basic eligible activities. So the the activity that we're focusing on through this grant process is public services, which are direct frontline service programs to respond to community needs that arose from the COVID-19 pandemic. And eligible services are those that are new or a quantifiable increase in the level of services that are anticipated as an impact of COVID-19. So some examples of eligible activities for this funding source include activities such as financial counseling to people who have been impacted by the pandemic, mental health counseling or other counseling, food pantry operations, case management or relocation services for persons who are affected by domestic violence. Could be activities, programs that benefit seniors, such as meal delivery or other services for homebound elderly persons. Meal delivery to quarantined individuals or individuals that need to maintain social distancing due to medical vulnerabilities or infection. They could be used to provide testing or diagnoses or other medical services at a fixed or mobile location. They could increase the capacity and availability of targeted health services for COVID-19 response within existing health facilities. Or it could be for the purchase of specialty equipment, supplies, or materials that are necessary to deliver the public service during an infectious disease pandemic. And these are all examples that came out of that Federal Register notice. So activities that would not be considered eligible are counseling to people. I'm assuming this is meaning people who have not been impacted by COVID-19. So none of the funds can be used for outside of responding to or preventing coronavirus. They cannot be used to improve buildings for the general conduct of government, with the exception of making buildings accessible for persons with disabilities. And this is the same as our regular block grant funds. Cannot be used for payment of general government expenses, political activities, income payments, and funds may not be used for subsistence type payments made to an individual or family for items such as food, clothing, housing, rent or mortgage, or utilities for under the public service category. So I would now like to turn it over to my colleague, Kimberly Mitchell, who will talk about some of the similar requirements for our Emergency Solutions Grant CV program.
All right, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you all can hear me pretty good. Today we're going to talk about the Emergency Solutions Grant, and this is the second round of these particular dollars regarding our COVID situation that we have right now. And so in terms of first thing I wanted to mention is that these dollars are specifically to make sure that we address COVID-19. We have also our regular entitlement that we receive every year, but these dollars have to go towards COVID-19. So that's one of the #1 criteria. And of course, it has to be to address homelessness because of the pandemic. And so in terms of the activities, the eligible participants, of course, you must be a nonprofit organization. You cannot be for profit, so you have to be a nonprofit organization. So at the time of the application, you have to make sure that you have your 501c3, and also there are other documents that are be required. I think they're going to talk about that later on in the presentation, but you have to be operating for at least a year before you can apply for these funds, okay? And the amount available at this particular point is roughly around $5 million. And that could go down or up. It just depends on how many applications we receive. All right, next, thank you. Next, we're going to talk about the eligible activities that we have under ESG. The very first one I want to talk about is the emergency shelter activity, which is probably the one that most people are interested in. For that one, you can do a lot of different activities under there. And so basically the very first thing is to pay for operating costs. And so if you are operating a shelter currently right now because of COVID in particular, and clients you're serving are being housed because of that at your organization, then this is an activity where you can apply for that funding. So operating costs, of course, includes a wide range of things, and that could be rent, utilities for your facility, insurance coverage, things like that. Of course, salaries for the staff that's there operating the facility. And so those are some of the examples there that we have. Transportation is included in there as well. So if you're having to transport clients back and forth, you can definitely use that for that. The very next activity is street outreach. For street outreach, this one is specifically for engaging clients. And so if you see homeless people out on the streets, literally, and your organization would like to actually go out there and engage the client and get them to come in off the street, then this particular activity can pay for those activities. So any level of engagement, be it mental health services that are needed for that client, transportation, of course, all of those things are associated with that. And I want to go back, I'm sorry, to the Mercy Shelter activity. One of the other things to keep in mind, if you plan on renovating your facility, not building a new one, but for renovating your existing facility, the Mercy Shelter activity is where that actually should be and where that belongs, okay? Next activity is Homeless Management Information System, better known as HMIS. We have a lot of acronyms that we have, and so we'll try to make sure we break those down for you. So the Homeless Management Information System is an activity by which it's a data system. And so in an effort to serve our homeless population, we have to make sure that we keep count of the number of homeless people that are here in our city, as well as some other demographic information that's needed. And that's to help us to better serve the people in the community. And so under that activity, you can pay for a data person to enter the information into HMIS, into the system at your organization, and that will pay for that person's salary. Also, any training costs are associated with that. And as well as any equipment, if you need to buy a laptop or computer, et cetera, for that particular program, then we can pay for all of those items as well. And so I just wanted to mention that Community Alliance for the Homeless, which I think are on this particular call, they're the organization, nonprofit organization that's responsible for managing HMIS. And so therefore they will be the contact agency if you are awarded under that activity that you will be working with. And so data quality is very important for everything that we're doing. Okay, next item. Okay, homeless prevention. Homeless prevention, this particular activity is to serve those who are already in their homes. Okay, they're not homeless at this point, but they're already in their homes, but they're about to be evicted. They're on the verge of being evicted, or their utilities about to be cut off. And so that's what this particular activity is for. And so we want to make sure that we keep as many people in their homes before coming into our homeless system. Our goal is to not have anybody come into the system. And so this particular activity can definitely go towards ensuring that we keep people in their homes, especially because of COVID-19 right now, to stay safe. The next activity I wanted to cover is rapid rehousing. For rapid rehousing, this is just the opposite of homeless prevention. So for this particular activity, this is for people who are already homeless. And so if there are people in your shelters already, or in any of your agencies that you have and they're already homeless, then this particular activity is to help and assist them with providing rental assistance as well as utility assistance. And that's up to 12 months of assistance for a particular client that you are serving. And so this is for those to get them back into their own homes. And so if they're homeless, we can possibly provide some rental assistance to give you some funding as a stopgap for you to save up, and therefore make sure that you are able to pay your rent after the assistance has been provided to that client. So that's for rapid rehousing. Okay, next I think I'll turn it over to Tanya.
I'll do this part. Tanya had a conflict.
Okay.
All right. So in respect to the program compliance, our compliance department is responsible for ensuring that all federal programs, our community development block grant, the emergency solutions grant, home and HOPWA, that are administered by HCD comply with federal guidelines and the cross-cutting regulations, which are established by the U.S. Department of HUD. The primary focus of compliance monitoring is threefold. One, to ensure that sub-recipients comply with grant guidelines and the federal cross-cutting requirements, which include program eligible activities, serving persons at 80% or less of the area median income, ensuring project affordability periods, doing environmental reviews, the labor standards, and making sure everyone is in compliance with the ADA, the American Disabilities Act. Secondly, they are looking and monitoring program and from the project and the program perspective. And then thirdly, they're providing technical assistance to the internal program managers and external sub-recipients. In this case, it would be you, the grantees, who are the sub-recipients. This part here, I'll just go right into this. In terms of our application process, the grants opened last week. They will close on April the 7th. All of the applications are reviewed first by HCD staff for completeness. Roughly, that take about a week or so. Scoring and ranking review are expected to be complete by the 26th. The scoring and ranking is done by an external grant review committee. The preliminary awards will be made around May the 5th, with the contracting beginning around May 31st. The application review process, as I said, we look at completeness and eligibility. And this is where the program staff really just go through to make sure all of the required documents and all of the questions and everything are answered correctly and all the information requested is provided. They do this before they send it over to the external review committee. And then the notification of the submission, application submission. So anyone who you receive a notification of the submission, if there are any deficiencies, anything that needs to be clarified, that will be done at this point. And then the notification of the submission or will either reject or approve. Okay. Next, we'll go into our electronic
Felicia, if I can.
Sure.
Felicia, can I interrupt you real quick?
Sure, thank you, Director.
Hey, sorry, this is Paul Young. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I apologize for being late. I wanted to just take this moment before we go into the application portal and how you submit to just take a pause and just check the temperature, see what questions you all have. I don't see any in the chat yet, so you can feel free to type any questions that you have in the chat, or if you'd like to unmute right now, you can unmute or type it in the chat. If not, we will just carry on. All right, hearing none, we will finish out the presentation. Thank you. Go ahead, Felicia.
All right, I just saw one question that came up.
Okay. Okay, can you discuss match for ESG? So I'm gonna ask Kim to pop back on to talk about that.
Sure. There is no match requirement for ESG. With our regular ESG entitlement, it would be, but for these CARES Act dollars, you are not required to have a match. And so if you apply and put in an application for $35,000, then you are not required to match that dollar for dollar.
Will the match help make them more competitive?
Good question. It would be helpful. It would be helpful to have some additional funding to actually support it if you could. But we definitely do understand, because this is related to COVID, you may not have a whole lot of options in terms of other funding, but it definitely would help if you had some additional funding.
As you have additional questions, feel free to type them in the chat and we will get to them. I see one more. Will this be a one-year grant beginning 7/1/21?
This particular grant is scheduled to be for 1 year, and the reason is because we only have 2 years to spend these dollars. And if an agency is unable to expend all of their funds at the end of their contract term, we have to have time to actually get it back out in the community and get it spent in time. And so usually it's around a year. But if an agency is encountering some challenges and we're not up against that deadline, then we may do an extension, possibly on that contract.
So I see one more question, and the question is, can organizations contact HCD for additional guidance? That certainly reach out to our team. If you have questions, it's best to put it in an email so that we can track it, but certainly feel free to email any other speakers that you see here today. All right, seeing no more questions, continue to think of things, type them in the chat, and we'll get to them as soon as we get through the electronic portal, application portal.
Okay, so we'll be on the lookout for those questions. Okay, so here we have the electronic application portal. All applications must be submitted online, and this is your starting point. Next slide. And so to access this, you want to go to the City of Memphis Housing and Community Development funding page. You will click on the link for ESG COVID-2. 2 is the second round of COVID, or the CDBG COVID-2. And from there, you will start your application profile and everything. Next slide. All right, and so your application components consist of 2 things. Under the application profile, essentially we're asking about your organizational information, any highlights, your experience, and under the profile is where you will upload the majority of those required documents. Your state charter, your existence, certificate of existence, your mission, your financial information, whatever is requested in the respective fields where you want to upload that. Once you finish that, and the profile has to be complete before you move to the next component of the application, you will move into the project application. Here you deal with the project narratives and the budget information about the program that you're requesting. And at that point, your agency budget is also requested. And there is a difference that we will discuss between the agency budget and the program budget. And this is just kind of showing you another picture of the process in terms of applications. We can go to the next slide. This is the first thing that you will see from your application, from the applicant profile. Here again, you have the general information. You select which program you would like to apply for. In this case, you will enter the link for the application that you are applying for. And so it's a little different from our normal SCIF, our Strategic Community Investment Fund, where you have to select the program. Here is you already be into it. Next. And this is just showing you the picture of the required documents and how you'll upload each one of those in the respective field. These are some of this is an example of the narrative input. There is a question and there's a space for you to provide an answer to the question. We want you to be concise, but as succinct as possible. There is not a character limit, but we want you to just answer the questions thoroughly. So when applying, your applicant profile must be completed prior to continuing to the application stage. Your documents, your narratives, your budget, most of those things are in the applicant profile sections unless otherwise requested at a different point. It's intended to provide information about your agency, not about the project at this point. The project or the program specific information is in the application portion of the submission portal. Your agency budget is also located on the City of Memphis HCD website, and you can download it there. I always tell people download it, and just have it there. We can go ahead and complete it. And then when you get to the portion in the application that requested, you'll just upload it back. There's also a matrix of required documents located on the City of Memphis HCD website. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page, you will see the links for the matrix as well as the agency budget, where you can download those. That matrix, get all of your documents together in a folder on your desktop, and then when you get to the respective session in the profile or application, you can just upload those things pretty quickly. So just a few little tips. You are able to print and review your application at any time. You can save your application and your profile at any time. So do that before you submit. You do that by clicking on the I in the profile as well as the application home pages. You can look at it, print it, and review it before you submit it. Because once you submit it, it's submitted. You're not able to go back in to change. And if you notice something that you made an error on or you want to change, then you will have to start the entire process back over. So we recommend that you print and review the applications before submitting. Your profiles from previous applications are not active in this link. And so if you have submitted part of the first round of COVID or SCIF, unfortunately, you will have to start a new profile. So your previous profile and previous links do not work on this application. Each application, as I said earlier, has a save draft and a save button. And it's best to save a draft until you are ready to submit, because once you submit, it's final. And then you are also able to download a PDF of your application so that you will just have a copy of your completed application. And you can do that at any time. Okay. And so we're going to jump back to the questions now. So Howard says that this may have been asked and answered. Can funding be used to cover staff or administration?
Yeah, I just
see
addressed
that's
that in the
been answered
question,
chat.
Felicia.
That's been answered.
It's been answered in the chat, but you probably want to read the answer because some that are viewing the video won't be able to see the chat. So the answer is that yes, you can use it to pay for staff. And the other question that was asked in the chat is there a requirement or prerequisite for program size? Is there a minimum number of people that can be served? Can you just serve one family? And then Kimberly input the answer, which is that there is no minimum set for how many people that you can serve. The key is your request for funding and the intended use of those funds. So I think those are good questions and good answers. So other questions that anybody have, please put them in the chat. I see one here. In the sections where you upload a document, is it possible to upload more than one document, or will it only accept one upload? Alicia, I'll turn to you and Tanya for that.
Sure. Each field you're only allowed to do one upload. So for example, in the field that requests your resumes or your job descriptions, I suggest merging all those together into one PDF and uploading, and labeling it, using the appropriate label for the document and uploading it there. So you would not upload if you had 5 resumes and 5 job descriptions. You want to merge those and name that job descriptions and resumes and do it all as one PDF. Okay, can we blend these funds with other home dollars that have already been expended? For example, house built using CHODO funds can be used for funds to renovate that unit as long as we use it for the intended purposes.
So I'll answer that one, and Kim, you can correct me, but these funds cannot be used for construction or renovation. So ESG, so let me separate. The CDBG public service dollars cannot be used for construction. These are for public service activities. So things like, any services that you are providing to the community, whether it's training, other public services. On the ESG side, you can use it for renovation of facilities, but it's for shelters. And so I'm going to let Kim speak to under what circumstances that would be allowed.
Sure. Just to make sure that everybody understands, because I think that's a good question that came up in terms of with CDBG and ESG in the past for our first allocation. And that is under public services. It is strictly basically social service activities related to COVID-19, just to make that real clear. It is not for renovation. It is not for new construction, anything like that. And so it is all social service based. It's on CDBG. Now for ESG, there is an activity under the emergency shelter activity. There's an area where you can apply for renovations for those dollars. Now it's for a shelter, but you have to be careful of double dipping in terms of 2 different federal pots of money. And so that would not be a suggestion that I would make for you to do that there.
So just to build on that, Howard, for that question, the appropriate pot that I think you would want to apply for in that situation is the Housing Trust Fund, which we will have more information coming about in the next few weeks and months as we look to capitalize that program. With those funds, those are city dollars, and you won't have any issue with it conflicting with the federal dollars that you've already invested in those properties. So the next question that I see is, can organizations apply as collaborators? And the answer is yes, but there will need to be one of the entities that is the fiscal agent and will need to submit all of the requested paperwork. Any other questions on either public services, public service grant, or ESG?
Paul, while we're waiting on those questions, I just wanted to reiterate and put a couple key items to remember when applying for these dollars, especially we could have some organizations on here who have not implemented federal funds before. Just keep in mind that this is a whole total different situation, and we are on a reimbursement system. I have to make sure that I mention that. And so when you are awarded, or if you're awarded these funds, we don't necessarily just cut you a check up front for those costs. And so you have to incur the cost in advance. You have to have money already in your accounts in order to incur those costs. But what we'll do, we'll come back and reimburse you for those costs. So always keep that in mind. And I have to make sure that I reiterate that for everyone. This is definitely on a reimbursement system. So we will not pay anything up in advance with these dollars. And the other key is, in terms of your applications, just to be mindful of the fact that the people that are going to be looking at your applications, they don't know anything about your organization. So just make sure that you're very clear on your intended use and what your program aspect will be for those funds, as well as making sure that your budget makes sense in terms of what your request is. Your budget is key in terms of what you're trying to do, because that's basically what we're going to be using to help determine who gets funding based on, your experience and what you're able to do with those dollars. Because we are held accountable for these funds, and we can be monitored at any time. So we want to make sure that you all are successful. And if you're successful, we're successful as well. So always keep that in mind.
Great comments, Kim. All right, seeing no other questions, keep in mind that our staff is still available. I know that we probably have already shared contact information. We can put some in the chat. But Howard is keeping us going because he has another question. So let me read his. Are rents and utilities allowable, eligible program expensables, and are they reimbursable? We have other programs for rent and utilities. I don't know if I guess they technically would be eligible under this program, but I would certainly direct those clients to some of the other programs that we established. We just finished giving a presentation to City Council about the rent and utility, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, which will cover rent and utilities, and we have about $28 million that we are going to open up to tenants and landlords, can apply directly. And we're going to open up that portal on March 1st. So that is where I would direct those in need of rents and utilities. And it's only for tenants that are at 80% of the area median income, which for a family of four is somewhere around $52,000 per year.
So,
Paul, I just wanted to add, Paul, on his question. I'm not sure if he's referring to one of the eligible activities that we have under ESG, under rapid rehousing. Rent and utilities is allowable in terms of paying for the tenants' rent and utilities. So I just wanted to mention that, as well as for homeless prevention, it's the same thing, and that's to prevent people from becoming homeless. So if they have, if they're late or about to be evicted, rather, and their utilities about to be cut off, then homeless prevention can pay for that to keep them housed. So just wanted to clarify that.
can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, you can.
I can't hear myself. That's weird. So how long do you think, because it takes us some time, if we were to put a family in one of our units or anywhere we would choose to put them in, rent is assessed or utilities is assessed. What's the time frame? Do we have a certain time to move them off that? Or is there a particular amount of funds that we can use to be used for that particular purpose? So can they have 3 months, 6 months, a year? If they're homeless, for the most part, it's going to take them some time to get to a point where they can earn the income to pay rent at whatever level. Let's just say it's $600 a month. So how long can we keep them in the program and use those funds to pay their rent and potentially the utilities?
Okay. Mr. Howard, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh.
No, I was getting ready to just say that's an ESG question, so I'm gonna turn it to you. So carry on.
Sure. What we can do is we can have an offline conversation just so I can get some in-depth information from you, Howard, in terms of if you're operating a facility, a shelter, et cetera, so I can give you some specific guidelines and information for what you're asking, because I don't want to paint this with a broad brush, but I will tell you in terms of just the rental assistance program, rental assistance that we can provide with ESG. One is the homeless prevention. The client is already in their home. We're trying to keep them from becoming homeless, of course, because of COVID. And for rapid rehousing, these are for people who are already homeless that are literally in a place not meant for human habitation. And we're trying to get them into a shelter. If they're in a shelter, we're trying to get them back into their own home. And so that's the basic of it. And if there's some in-depth questions that you may have, you can always email me, and Erica can put my email address in the chat. It's kimberly.mitchell@memphistn.gov, and we can continue our conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay.
And I see
Any other
that
questions for
Felicia
Ms.
posted a lot of the stuff in the chat, email addresses. If you need contact information for staff, you can see that there. Trying to give it a brief pause to see if anybody had anything else. I think that will bring us to a close today. So thank you. And if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out. We look forward to receiving your applications. Y'all have a great day.